Jesus is the reason for the season. Is he for all, or maybe just for us 3D disciples? Welcome to the 3D Disciples podcast, where we're working together to develop disciples who display God's love as we deploy into God's world. Join us on this journey by liking, subscribing, and following this channel. I'm your host, Hannah, and alongside us is the pastor of FBC Clarion, Jason Hunter. May Jesus help us climb to new heights. So I was a little bit startled to learn that for the first 14 years of your life, Brianna, which, by the way, our producer-director is unabashedly joining us on the podcast today.
Or not.
Yeah,
Have
sarcastically.
someone holding a gun off camera so she stays in her seat.
So welcome, Brianna. Thanks for coming on. We do really appreciate it.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So anyways, I was surprised to learn, we were having a conversation like a week ago, that for the first 14 years of your life, that you didn't make a connection between the Christmas season and Christ's birth. So, because you didn't grow up in the church, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So that just surprises me. So I thought maybe we should start the episode asking Jason here if he could give us a short summary of why Jesus is the reason for the season, i.e., what events were taking place during Jesus' birth.
So the biblical narrative of Jesus' birth. Couple interesting things about that. Only two of the Gospels have any record of that, Matthew and Luke. Mark starts with Jesus' public ministry, which was basically at his baptism. That's where Mark's Gospel starts. And John, because John's Gospel is not one of the synoptic Gospels, it's a little bit more pointed. He talks about the incarnation in chapter 1, but quickly moves on to John and the calling of the disciples and so forth. Mm-hmm. So the story, the narrative, at least the New Testament narrative part of Jesus' birth is housed basically within two of the four Gospels. And so we learn about, the virgin birth, which was and a lot of it is heavily in Matthew, because Matthew is writing to Jewish people to help them understand that Jesus is the prophesied Messiah from the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And so Matthew wants to connect as many Old Testament prophecies to Jesus as he can. And so he does that. So we learn from like in Isaiah that this virgin would give birth, and so we hear about that part of it, and the Annunciation to Mary. We learn a little bit about Mary when she kind of says, as unto me, I'm Christ's servant, I'm God's servant, whatever He wants, let that happen to me. We find the backstory of John being Jesus's cousin, who was 6 months older than him, who will be John the Baptist. Of course, then we have the story of the shepherds, which is real popular. The angel Gabriel coming to the shepherds, announcing the gospel that the Savior's coming. This will be good news. This is one of the first places we hear the idea of the gospel, good news. This is good news that will be for all people, that unto you, a Savior is born, who is Christ the Lord. Mm-hmm. And then the kind of the angels joining in with the praise of God. We have, the Jesus being born in this lowly state and in a manger, wrapped in swaddling.
What is a manger, just for anyone who doesn't know?
A feed trough.
Okay.
A place that when they were traveling, there was people were being sent for the census, and so the town of Bethlehem is overflowing with people, and apparently they had to lodge somewhere where animals would have been kept, because they had this manger there that they laid him in, which was basically a trough for hay. Mm-hmm. And it's a
soft spot to lay, at least.
A soft spot to lay. Identifying Jesus with the lowly, this becomes part of that he identifies with the lowliest. The least of these would be one of the kind of ideas that are there. And we hear a little bit later on about the wise men coming. Interestingly enough, that would have been probably up to 2 years later, that they weren't probably most likely, just in the historical narrative, that he weren't there the actual night that Jesus was born. It talks about they found the child, so it uses a different term to define him, in a house. So he was living, he wasn't in the manger that night. He was, when they get there, he's in a house, and it uses a different word. Instead of infant, it uses a word for child, which is an older. And then, of course, Herod has all the children killed 2 years and younger, and it says he based that on what he learned from the wise men, them telling them when they saw the star come up first. And so they're like, he's in that 2 year range somewhere. Like Herod's like, if I stop at 2 years, I'm probably going to get him, And so he based that on the time frame that the wise men had told him, and that's why he picked every child from 2 years and younger.
And Herod was a king when concerned that someone's going to take over his throne.
Yep, that's exactly right. Okay. And they were warned by an angel. We hear the story of Joseph. Joseph's my favorite.
I was wondering if you're going to miss him. You're like, I can't miss Joseph.
Can't miss Joseph. Joseph's my favorite.
Yeah.
He's often, and just like I just did, he's often the most overlooked person in the story. Joseph gets visited by more angels than anybody in the Bible, at least 2 times and possibly 3 times that an angel makes a personal visit to Joseph. And every time he's visited by the angel, it says he immediately goes and does what the angel says. So like he was going to divorce Mary, an angel comes and tells him to marry her, name the baby Jesus, and it says like immediately he went and married her. He's there, and the angel comes and says, they're going to kill the baby, go to Egypt, and it says he got up. It's like, sounds like at midnight. He got up. All right, we're going to Egypt. and they took off. And then probably while he was in Egypt, the angel came and saw him again and said, now you can go back. And so he's actually personally visited by more angels than anybody in the Bible. He gets more one-on-one. Wow. And his response is what I call Abrahamic response. Like Abraham was told to get up and go, and he got up and went. And it said it was counted to him as righteousness, that immediate response of faith. And Joseph does that like 3 times. So there's all kind of like
there really is
amazing little vignettes of moments in that whole birth of Christ. Not mentioning, and that's just the birth. There's a couple stories about his childhood, and then they all move on into his public ministry. But those are some of at least the narrative, the highlights of the story that surround his birth, his conception with the virgin, his birth, and then up to about 2 years old with the visit of the wise men. And we encapsulate that all into what we call the Advent season, all of that.
The Advent season, which is funny because I had never heard that my whole life, the Advent, until, I don't know, a couple years ago. So, there's a lot, I guess. What I also should mention is that the 3 of us, as we were talking a week ago, there's just a lot of different traditions and diversities and experiences that we've all had throughout Christmas. And so I thought it was good to just like get down to what does the Bible say about what happened during this time, or maybe not during this time. We're not exactly sure.
And that's another debate.
Yeah, that's another question. So just moving on to something a little more lighthearted. What is one of your favorite Christmas memories? Brianna, would you like to start?
Sure. So I was actually reflecting on this a little bit earlier today, and just kind of went back into my mind of Christmas morning at my house growing up. And I remember when I was probably my Hannah's age, like preteen age, and maybe like 10, 11 in the morning, I would get on the phone with my best friend, and well, not Scott until a little bit later, but later in life I got on the phone with Scott. Was that like a phone
with a cord or?
It had a cord, yes. Well, I eventually got one of those really long cords so I could go around the corner, and chat. But anyway, I'd get on the phone with my friends, and they'd be like, "What did you get for Christmas?" And I would be like, "I've opened one thing." And they're like, "We ripped into everything," and they would tell me all the things that they got for Christmas. And my parents were like, this is important for us. And so we're going to savor every single gift. And so it would be like one gift an hour.
Oh, wow.
And it would last the whole day. They wanted it to last the whole day. So everything was like wrapped. And eventually I remember a couple of years that everything was just out. Like I remember you were talking about that at one point last week where everything was just kind of out and you run in and you see everything. But everybody would kind of get up at different times, and it just wasn't our tradition to like wake up and be
And
ready to
go crazy.
So,
Yeah.
So all my friends would be like, "What do you mean you only opened one thing already?" You know, and I would be like feeling weird, but looking back on it, it's probably, you know, the most memorable thing that happened Christmas morning.
Yeah, that's very different than anything I've ever experienced.
That's funny.
Jason, what
like
is one?
Hanukkah all in one day. One
Oh,
gift
yeah.
every hour.
That is true.
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't the reason.
Jason, what was one of your favorite Christmas memories?
The one that sticks with me, you know, growing up, I was Christmas was a big deal for my mom. And, like, I remember, like, kid, like, trying to go to bed, trying to go to sleep, couldn't go to sleep. That real anxiety of getting up the next morning, it was a big deal. But there was this one year because we always lived away from my extended family, my uncles and my aunts and my cousins, and because my dad was in college when he went to college when I was in second grade, so he was off in college, and so at Christmas break would be a chance for us to go back to our home, their home, where my grandparents were and all the family, visit all those. So there's one night me and my cousin. So this was really close with one of my cousins, and so we would always go to his house and we'd play. And I don't know how old I was. We were old enough. Our favorite game was Crash Up Derby. You know, like had these little Matchbox cars.
Oh, okay.
And we would sit across from each other and we would just slam them, like roll them towards each other as hard as we possibly could.
Young, I would
and
say
just
young.
break stuff. That's the age that we were at. And I don't know what got our attention. I don't remember like an actual, you know, knock on the window or whatever, but something got our attention and we like went to the window and we opened it and like Santa Claus was standing outside the window and we like just freaked out and we were like, you know, like, so, and like all my uncles and my aunts and mom and dad, they were all down in the living room talking and visiting with each other. And then we go tearing down the hallway, you know, and like, y'all not going to believe, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And then we were like, well, who was it, you know? And we like looking around like all my uncles were there. Everybody was there. It's like, that was really him. He's like, oh! You know, like freaking out. So I don't know. That's one that has stuck with me my entire life.
Like
that moment, like it was. We were true believers. We were true believers in Santa, that's for
Santa
sure.
believers. Yeah, that's a good one. I was thinking about this too on my way here, and it's funny. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it's the one that sticks with me the most. So when I met my husband, before we were obviously married, I went to a Christmas Eve service with him. And that wasn't my church tradition to have any sort of Christmas Eve service. And so I really enjoyed it. It was like candlelight, and it just felt very magical. So I was really looking forward to it the following year. We went to his grandma's church to attend this. So we drive up to his grandma's church for this candlelight service. She's singing in the choir. We get there, and everyone at the church is like, we haven't seen her. We don't know where she's at. And so we go back to her place. It's only a few miles from the church. She's not there. We get a hold of some people who know that she decided to take her car out and drive up to Erie. She was supposed to follow another family member. Well, apparently they got separated somehow car-wise, and it was snowing like crazy that night. She didn't show up. So we start calling the police to try and figure out where she is. They said she used her debit card in like Waynesburg, which if anyone's familiar with Pennsylvania, that's south of where we live, opposite direction of Erie. Anyway, so we stayed up the whole night, just like waiting for her to show up, hoping that she would. And at about like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, she just waddles into the house and she's like, oh, hey guys, you're here. And we're just like, we have been waiting for you. Like, where have you been? She's like, oh, I'm just hungry. Can you feed the dogs, please? And we're just, oh. Anyway, so yeah, the case of the missing grandma is one of my most.
Did she at least have a good story of where she was?
No, she has some memory problems, so she just got lost because of the snow and she couldn't read signs, and yeah, so we didn't get to go to the candlelight service, but I was just happy Grandma made it home, so it was like a real good Christmas gift, you know. Wow. So that was one of my favorite memories. Okay, so Brian, I'll start this question for you. What traditions did you have as a child at Christmas that you've decided to do differently since raising your own family? And maybe there's many. You can pick a few.
I don't know exactly how it connects to what we did when I was a child. obviously I already told you, we had gifts and stuff on Christmas morning. Mm-hmm. Whenever Elijah was about 3, I think, we realized that there was, I guess, a moment where we could set the tone for our kids. Mm-hmm. And we just, I guess the kids were starting to get old enough to really know what was going on. Mm-hmm. There really hadn't been a moment where we thought, whether they were connecting with who Jesus was or not. And so we decided to just step back and think about how we were celebrating Christmas in general, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
As a family, and what kind of memories we were leaving with our own kids. And I had read a blog, and the woman's little boy was 5, mm-hmm. and he asked his mom, "What does Jesus get for Christmas?" And he said, "You give us gifts for our birthday, and this is Jesus' birthday. What does he get?" And that just kind of floored me. It wasn't something I'd ever thought about before. Like you brought up before, the first time I ever went to church was when I was 14. My mom, that was what she asked for Mother's Day. Things had been really hard that year, and she was like, "The only thing I want for Mother's Day is for us to all go to church." Mm-hmm. And from that point on, I've never been out of church again, mm-hmm. Other than maybe a short season in college. We just started thinking through, how can we celebrate Jesus's birthday?
Yeah.
And so we decided as a family that we would make a much bigger deal of our kids' birthdays than Christmas.
Okay.
And so we would flood them with gifts and things like that on their birthday, and that we would give our gifts to Jesus on his birthday.
Oh, okay.
And
that's
so
cool.
we've, kind of made a whole tradition around it about how we do that. And we get out the Samaritan's Purse or World Vision Compassion catalogs,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody gets a budget, and they get to pick out, they love the little baby lambs and send those to children around the world, and blankets and baby chicks, and just different things to people around the world. So I think that's probably the biggest. And then we do celebrate Advent in our house, and we just take every single night before Christmas, and we read scripture. We read through just the entire Christmas story. And then we have little felt pieces that we've made, and the kids get to open. So we have like a little envelope thing up on the wall, like a little banner. And we pull an envelope down and pull the piece out that matches the scripture for that day. Mm-hmm. And then the little kids get to put it up on the felt thing that we have.
So it's kind of like slowly creating a nativity scene?
Yes, so it slowly creates a nativity. Thank you for summing that up.
You're fine. So those are 2 traditions that you have, which I've
Yes.
never heard of it that way. That's really cool.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing. Jason, is there any traditions that you've done differently since you're raising your own family, or the same?
Yeah, our traditions are obviously not as well thought out as Brianna's.
The Underhills are good at that. They really are.
I'm all of a sudden
intentional.
envious, to be quite honest with you. Like, they get the parenting award.
Well, somebody did it before us. They shared before us. And so I did decide, when someone asked me, I would share, but I certainly don't want anybody to feel like, oh, like I should have thought of that or something, because you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And somebody else shared with us.
Yeah, and Christmas is a challenge. I mean, and that's probably, and one of the reasons we're having this whole podcast is that this is how to balance Christmas, the secular part, along with Christmas, the religious part. That's a great challenge for disciples. I mean, that's especially disciples in America. That is, it's been something that we have wrestled with pretty much our entire lives, and so that's why our traditions are still kind of morphing from time to time. Because when Carly was little, we would have done a lot more like my mom did with me. It was a much bigger deal, big tree, wait for them to go to sleep and put stuff together, and big packing parties and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It has gradually moved away from that. One of the traditions, one of the things I would say that is a tradition for us now is we do get gifts at Christmas. Our kids do, and it's a tradition now that we get to open one on Christmas Eve, because like my mom, you couldn't. It was Christmas morning, and that was it. And so Shelley and I are bad. Like, we get excited about the things we have for one another and for the kids. We have some surprises, and we're like, we just can't wait. We gotta, and everybody gets to like pick one the night on Christmas Eve, and so that's kind of one of our things. But
Your pushovers. No, just kidding.
yeah, but I mean, we're down to now, like our tree is Shelley has a ceramic tree that I think her grandmother made, hand painted, like,
Oh,
the
cool.
ceramic
We
class
had one of
somewhere.
those when I was growing up.
And that's become our Christmas tree because, again, we're very busy this time of year and lots going on at the church and so forth. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we won't even put up our other tree. That's just our tree.
Mm-hmm.
Put up a manger and yeah.
So it grows. It
It
grows.
just
as we
kind
grow.
of, it's different every year except for opening the gift on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, my mom. That's funny because my mom. That's what her thing was to open one gift on Christmas Eve, and your mom was like, "No way."
No way. Mhm.
Okay. So maybe this question is more so for Jason, but Brianna, feel free to answer it if you'd like. So should we as Christians be concerned that some of the Christmas festivities can become idols?
Well, I think we as Christians should be concerned about anything that can become idols, and there's certainly a lot at Christmas, a lot of things and traditions that we need to be aware of. Of course, that happens any other time, and just kind of like I said, this is a particularly difficult season. I was meeting with my League of Pastors recently, and we were talking about this, and there's two very strong emotions going on this time of year that makes it really difficult to navigate. On one hand, we have this kind of immense joy. You've been using the word magic a lot when we've talked about this, and I think it's a really good word. That kind of Norman Rockwell magic. It's a Wonderful Life, perfect Christmas. That's just like those childhood memories we have that are so precious and amazing. And then there's an equal but opposite kind of sorrow for a lot of people at this time of year that is on the equal scale, as many people will be alone, loved ones will have passed away, and this will be, and that strikes harder because at the heart, one of the things I do like, I think is really strong about Christmas is it's a very family oriented time. And so for us to have, as a nation, in our national secular celebration of Christmas, to have a time where family is the focus and getting together and loving your loved ones, much like Thanksgiving, but in some ways it's even different around Christmas. It's even seems to be more family centric around Christmas. I think that's just good for a nation, Then there's the religious kind of celebration that above that, and so in bringing those two together, because there's lots of people who that's what they ask. Like you were talking about, your mom wanted, like, all I want for Mother's Day is for you to. I literally hear that year after year. All that people literally ask their family, all I want for Christmas, my Christmas gift
Is everyone to
come to church with me. Christmas Eve service, or if it's a
a lot
Christmas
of people
day.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a Christmas present.
Yeah.
That lots of people ask. And so there is this melding of those two together in that kind of way. But yeah, so I think there's just some reality of the situation of what, like I said, there's two celebrations going on simultaneously. That, there is a secular celebration of Christmas. It's a national kind of holiday that involves a lot of really good things, family. And then there's a religious celebration that's celebrated the incarnation, the coming of Christ, the advent of Christ, and that biblical story. And they kind of happen simultaneously. We were talking about these kind of two planes. They're not completely mashed together completely. There is some separation between those two. And I think and that's the tension that we feel, is like that separation. How far? Because there's some people who would argue they need to be completely severed and separated, never to look at each other again.
Yeah.
And then there are people who think they should be completely melded together and squished together and become synonymous. And I don't think that's right either. And so holding them both and appreciating them both, I think, is the real challenge. And that's what the tension we often feel.
Yeah.
And say it's fine to have celebrations as a nation, as a family, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's good and healthy. And then there's religious celebration, and they kind of go together, and just holding that tension, remembering that they're not, that there is this separation between the two, and so that you can appreciate the, like one of my other, I'm gonna sneak in another favorite memory.
Go for it.
Was that we would go, like I said, we would travel to visit my family, and we would always go to my grandparents on Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve was a big family event for me. This was the only time of the year I got to see all my aunts, all my cousins. We gave gifts to each other. We had a giant feast. We were just talking about Southern dressing versus Northern stuffing. That's when we would have dressing and all the Southern comfort food.
So you had dressing at Christmas too.
We had it every chance we could get. Every chance we could get it. It was Southern comfort food buffet style that would put any Cracker Barrel to shame at my grandma's house.
As it should.
As it should.
Cracker Barrel is the best Southern for me as it gets.
And so we would do that, and then like my grandfather had a tradition, and he would go buy like hundreds of dollars worth of fireworks, and then like he would get all the grandkids out there. It was like he became a kid that night, and he would get us all out there, and we would light fireworks off in the front yard for an hour, and the grandpa was right there with us, and so that's good and healthy and for families.
Yeah.
But then also one of the things he required is every year before we opened our first gift, they read a nativity story out of the Bible, and we had a family prayer, and we would hold hands as a family and pray, and he required that too. And so he was holding both of those things together in that kind of tension, and I just think that's our struggle in remembering that.
Yeah, and you almost
that's a really long answer for a short question.
Well, you actually answered another question that I had, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was going to ask what parts are beautiful and what some parts of Christmas are not. And what I heard you say was like the parts that are beautiful is that the whole family gets together. Some parts that are maybe not so much is that it is a really hard time for some people this year. Brianna, I'm sorry, you were going to say something though. You came up to the microphone.
I was just going to interject that we feel that tension in our home because we're trying to put the focus on Jesus this season. And still, there's so many things that are more magical to my children that the younger ones, we still have TVs. We still watch Christmas movies. We have a tree. There's, beautiful lights and hot cocoa and, the whole 9 yards. And, so they're not immune to how, like you said, that word, the magic of the season. And it's just so hard to hold space for the magic to really be, like, this is amazing that our Lord is now incarnated on earth, and it's really hard for that to be magical for children. So
it's hard to wrap their head around something like that.
It's hard when, like, we've tried so hard and it's like still Isabella's like, Santa!
Yeah.
It's like, that wasn't the thing that we were trying to put the most emphasis on, but it happens anyway. It's just hard to keep the focus.
Yeah. And I was going to say the question about the beautiful and maybe not so much. The one thing that I find really beautiful around the Christmas season is the spirit of giving. Like you guys do the World Vision catalog. And this giving spirit comes from everybody. Well, not everybody, but people who aren't Christians.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love that about the Christmas season.
You see biker gangs driving 100 miles to give stuffed toys to somebody.
That part is just so beautiful. And I do really enjoy that. And then also, I just feel like it's a little more accepted for us to talk about Jesus this time of year because people are like, oh, that's just how you celebrate it. But at least we're allowed to talk about it and people might give it a listen. The part that I think is not so beautiful about it is you can get in touch with all of these Christmas things, but miss the best gift of all, which is the fact that Jesus was reincarnated. And like when I talk to friends who don't know Jesus or know of him, but have no relationship with him, and they're just like, oh, I love this time of year, but they're missing out on the best part. It's just like, oh, my heart is broken. Like, I just wish you could see both. So that's that for me. And you guys both brought up that there are some tensions that you have during this time of year. Is there any other tensions or like challenges that you have during Christmas, Jason, like personally? that you want to share?
well, no. I mean, again, I mean, there's a phrase in the Bible, and Christmas is probably the epitome of this phrase. So in John 14, 15, 16, 17, Jesus is talking to the disciples, so I'm going to use that whole phrase because I can't remember exactly which chapter he says this in. Mm-hmm. But he's praying for his disciples, and he's getting ready to leave his disciples. And he prays to the Lord. He said, I don't ask you to take them out of the world, but leave them in the world. Mm-hmm. And so we come up with this phrase from this prayer that Jesus is praying for us as disciples. And this is a discipleship challenge, to be in the world but not of the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of the discipleship challenge, and it's probably good for me to make this a big discipleship push since this is the 3D Disciple podcast, right? Yep. Is that one of our greatest challenges as disciples is being in the world and not of the world, right? And that happens every day of our lives all the time. Mm-hmm. But Christmas is one of those, is like where we can see that struggle the best. Yeah. Because the secularization and the secular celebration that goes on at Christmas really does try to intrude into the religious celebration of what we celebrate, the Nativity, the Incarnation, and then the Advent. And it really tries to push in on that. And this is just one of those places where it's almost crystal clear that we see that happening. And you hear this, Christians recognize this because this is why we have the bumper stickers, right? Jesus is the reason for the season, right? We have that saying, and that saying exists because Christians have realized that the secular world is trying to push in and because of the money and the excitement and the magic can overwhelm that sometimes, or at least it seems to be trying over that. Or we'll say, keep Christ in Christmas is another one that we'll kind of use as a battle cry and all those are recognizing like we're in this world but we try not to be of this world. And that's a really difficult thing. And I think it happens all the time. But Christmas is that place where we can see it so clearly. And so it's just a good reminder for us to remember that is what we are as disciples. We're supposed to be in this world. We can enjoy many of the things in this world that the world has to offer, but we should never be of this world. Our focus always needs to be on the life to come, on the king, advancing the kingdom, being a disciple. And there are some challenges at Christmas, and we recognize that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you read the whole last statement I was going to make. That's fine.
Good. Did I?
Was about like being in the world and of the world.
Oh, wow.
But what I was going to say to the listeners is like this conversation, like we haven't been able to give you all an exact formula on how to handle that. Yeah. And that's why we really wanted a guest. Yeah. Brianna was more than willing to come on to just talk about how each of us just kind of try to deal with this melding of secularness and Christianity like you were talking about. So I would just want to end with scripture. And is there anything else you guys want to add? Okay. So Romans 15:12 says, and again, Isaiah says, the root of Jesse will spring up, one who will arise to rule over the nations. In him the Gentiles will hope. So Merry Christmas to you too, and you listeners.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Our prayer is that you've heard something today that will help you be a better disciple of Jesus Christ. We also want to encourage you to make sure you take your next step in your discipleship journey by considering what it is you would do about what you heard today, and then go and do it. Finally, we want to invite you to join us at 10:30 on Sundays, either at our Main Street campus in downtown Clarion between Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's, or online at fbcclarion.com. God bless.
Here's your sound check again. Jason, what was your favorite meal item at Thanksgiving?
I always like the stuffing. That's my favorite part. But what I miss is they don't have cornbread dressing in the north.
Cornbread dressing?
Oh, dressing. We make dressing, but we don't make cornbread dressing.
What's cornbread dressing?
I'm really
what do you make
I'm weird
dressing?
about this microphone. We make chicken dressing.
What's cornbread dressing? Is it like just the grease from bacon?
The bread is cornbread versus regular bread.
White bread.
Oh, well, who doesn't love cornbread?
and then you make kind of a stuffing, but it's usually in a flat pan, and you bake it. It's called dressing.
We make dressing.
different than stuffing.
Ours is Scott's aunt's recipe, and she just cooks a whole chicken. And so I'm like, I'm making a chicken casserole. That's what's happening right now. But we're gonna call it dressing, and we're gonna serve it with turkey. But I literally just made a whole chicken.
So
It's got chicken in it.
It's a whole chicken.
It's a chicken casserole. That's not dressing.
It's good though.
so wait, dressing
It's
is
amazing.
It's good.
I want some.
All I know is the second one's in the freezer, and we're gonna get it out.
so
One
dressing
day.
is stuffing. You mean
In the
What's
South.
what's the difference? Just
just
what you
made
call
of
it?
cornbread?
That it's in the South?
Yeah.
No, because mine's not made of cornbread. Mine is made of regular.
But that's not dressing. You
It's
can
his
call it
aunt's
dressing.
recipe. I don't know.
But
All
it's
I
not
know
dressing.
is it's his favorite part of Thanksgiving. and
Oh, I'm
so I
sure.
made it.
Does it have bread in it?
It has the Pepperidge Farm herb seasoned.
That's more
bag
like
of
stuffing.
stuff. It is. It is.
It's more like stuffing.
Cornbread
Yeah.
dressing. So do you have stuffing then?
Not in
no?
the South. I never had stuffing until I married Shelley.